Hey, Glenn. I heard we might have some internet issues. And if we do, we'll pick up the phone and give you a ring-ding-ding. Riders, defensive lineman, Ali Saad out of Bowling Green. Not sure if you know anything about him. You probably just heard from your boys as well on the panel there. But a defensive lineman that sounds like could play pretty quick.
Yeah, that's the one thing I've noticed in the last probably, Barney, 7 to 10 years in the CFL draft is that every single year the players, whether it's from Canadian colleges or U.S. colleges that are Canadian, are more pro ready than ever before. Every year they get a little bit better. There's a bigger group that's ready. Back in the day, the draft was sort of, you brought in players for depth and special teams that would develop into the Ray Elgards or the Jeff Fairholms. Very few Canadians back then were stepping on the field and starting in their first year. But, it happened, but it was rare. It was more developmental. And then they became stars. Now we're talking players that can step on the field and compete immediately and not just on the team. So this is a guy that is in that mold and it clearly looks like Corey Mace's priority in the offseason, the line of scrimmage, offensive line, defensive line. We're going to get better at the line of scrimmage. Clearly, that was Mace's objective.
Yeah, well, they got. I think they got the other pieces, so they're going where it's all. Isn't it funny though too? And as someone follow the CFL draft passively, hoping for a lot of the Sasky guys to get taken, put in the work, right? You go to that combine, you just see it. Like I talked about the mom, and they definitely had a French accent. The mom bringing her kid the chicken and rice for lunch so he can eat. Like, it's just so grassroots and so cool to watch all that. But it's funny, Glenn, in the CFL draft, where it's almost like Bizarro World or the opposite. If you're going to see maybe these stars, the Canadian stars, the Rourkes, the Elgersmas, they're going to go late because they're like a maybe down the road, right? Whereas the other way, it's the guys that maybe don't have aren't coming with the big name and the flashy signs and all that they're going first.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, for years, the first 2 rounds at least of the draft were almost all offensive linemen. So, people used to say when I started in television, you guys got to put the draft on TV. And I went, okay, but about offensive linemen, is that going to bring in a whole and no shot against O linemen? They're crucial to winning and losing, and they're well-spoken, good athletes that are huge, obviously, but they're just not it's not a quarterback, it's not a stats guy, it's not a guy that's scoring touchdowns and doing the touchdown dance. So that's why there was always this discussion on why the show isn't on, and now we get the first 2 rounds, and now receiver number. Curtis Rourke, to your point, is a guy that, would be one of the few, I think, that I may take a chance as a GM taking him in an earlier round. Like, he's been drafted in the NFL. You're probably looking at least when you're drafted and get the signing bonus down there, add in the politics, you're at least 2 or 3 years, right? But with Curtis Rourke, to possibly have a Canadian that you can win with at that position, like Nathan in Vancouver or Trey Ford in Edmonton, you have real legit quarterbacks that, that they get up here, they have to get in that learning curve again, and they have to be committed, but they have this raw talent and skill to not just, be Canadian quarterbacks on your roster that you can market, but they are starting in quarterbacks that can win championships for you. And that's what, you got to make these evaluations, and sometimes they don't go the way you think. I mean, look at Tom Brady in the NFL. I mean, that to go, sixth round for Tom Brady, who becomes the best quarterback of all time. So, it's always hit and miss. And it would be a Curtis Rourke that would be the only thing that would tempt me into an early round for a guy that's been drafted in the NFL, or you're not going to see for a while. Other than that, I think you go to pick players that are going to be in your training camp.
All right. Glenn, hang tight. We're going to call you because the internet connections is a little bit different. If you're just driving home and tuning in, the Riders have only made one pick. Ali Saad, he's a defensive lineman out of Bowling Green, 6'3", 280, suiting up 44 games for the Falcons. He's out of Windsor, Ontario. Sounds like a good player. He had 78 defensive tackles, 14 tackles for a loss, 72 yards, 6 sacks, four forced fumbles, and 1 block kick over his time at Bowling Green. So impressive stats. He also earned 2024 Academic All-MAC, so a smart fellow as well. Glenn, when I was talking to Duncan and Dave, it's like, what's it going to take? Is it going to take a guy like you to change the quarterback ratio rule and that whole thing in the CFL for Canadians?
Well, I've been an advocate for it for a long time. I mean, if you have a Canadian, he counts against your ratio. End of story. No, I mean that's really what it should be. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you have a starting, which I agree with, because again of that developmental aspect, and we want to see Canadians on the field. It is our game after all, but they become stars. I mean, the leading rusher, the leading receiver in the league last year were Canadians. So I think, to your point, the quarterback has got to count. Now, it hasn't really been that much of an issue. We've had Canadian quarterbacks, Greg Vavra and different guys, but they haven't become what I think potentially a Nathan Rourke could become, or a Curtis Rourke, his brother, or even Nagelsmann. I haven't seen enough of him yet to make my own evaluations, but everything I hear and read, he's pro ready. So, I hope it gets changed. I mean, we have a new commissioner. Maybe he'll look at it and probably, hopefully, uses common sense and says, "Why not? I mean, he's Canadian. He's on the field. Why wouldn't he count?"
It just makes so much sense. And Canadian kids, and we want them playing, and it's the biggest position. It's like, why are we putting a deterrent there? It's quite the head scratcher. We look at a kid, and we talked about it earlier, from Regina, Saskatchewan, tore it up. Mason Nias, I think he should be slinging it in the CFL somewhere. He's going to have a heck of a coaching career, though, and maybe play quarterback for Team Canada at the Flags. But that ratio rule, maybe that next time I get a chance to talk to the commissioner, that's something I can push on. This draft too. And again, talking to Duncan, Dave's down right across from the War Room in Mosaic Stadium right now. Like, there is a lot of work that goes into this. It's the mock drafts, and then, okay, what if a guy retires like a day before, and then things are all out the window, or retires today, or a team. You don't see a lot of trades too, Glenn. And we're not seeing any yet that I'm aware of in the CFL. There's just a lot of work all around.
Yeah, it's a lot of homework. I think you're going to hear most of the quarterbacks and coaches coaches when they are interviewed during the draft show. They're going to tell you that the interview process was super important, that they're looking for character guys that have that high compete level, and let's be honest, guys that are going to be committed, not come to camp disappointed because they're not playing in any other league, but come to camp ready to contribute and lay it on the line for their teammates. I mean, that's what you're looking for in a guy. And I talked to some young prospects that might get drafted today, and I always give them the same advice, and that is, don't worry about the round or the team, or even if you get drafted. Your goal in the next 3 to 4 days is to get to a training camp, get an invite to a training camp. All you have to do is get your foot in the door somehow. So, let's say hypothetically we're at the last round and, you get a call from a team saying, hey, we're probably not going to pick you, but we want to sign you as a free agent, and we'll do it. We'll talk in the next day or two. That's okay, too. Don't worry too much about the round. Don't worry, because, down in the NFL, if you're a first-round pick, you're an automatic millionaire. Big difference. That's where the difference is. So what you want to do is get into camp, make the team, establish yourself, you'll make some money playing pro football. That's fantastic. But don't worry about that in the draft order and where you go and what round and all of those things. It's just get to training camp so you can show the coaching staff when you're playing against veterans that you can compete at the pro level, make the team, even if you're covering kicks, and then from there you make the starting lineup offense or defense. But you have to earn it.
Yeah, for sure. Looking at the picks so far, if we go through them, Canadian receiver Damien Alford, Calgary Stampeders. He went first overall. Obviously, he's coming up to play. Devin Versuk, linebacker, Hamilton Tiger Cats, played for Windsor. Ottawa selected Montana Grizzly, Keelan White, with their third overall pick. Then the Riders, of course, go with Bowling Green defensive lineman Ali Sad. Montreal, and Justin Dunk was talking about this guy, if you caught hour one with us, offensive lineman Tiger Shanks from UNLV. So Montreal beefing up on the offensive line with the Canadian, and then the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Wyoming linebacker Connor Shea. So looking at things, what do we got for as far as receivers? Not many receivers. Nothing on the running back front from what I see. What DBs, Colson? No DBs. Lots of line work so far, like you said, Glenn, in round one.
Yeah, and that's going to be a priority, obviously, because whether you're looking at an O lineman or a D lineman as an automatic starter, you bring him in as a depth player and to learn the next level. And then once you have done that, whether he's on the active roster or not, he is still an asset to your team. And I want to be careful not to talk about players as just business dealings and assets like that, but they are. I mean, if by Labor Day, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have lost 4 or 5 Canadians due to injury, then they're looking to make a trade. And that's when you can trade up in the next year's draft, or you trade for, good American talent, bring them in because you're giving up one of the guys that you drafted that isn't quite ready yet, but they need him desperately. So they're going to pay a lot for him. So it becomes valuable assets to your team. And that's why, a lot of times they're looking for the best players, not necessarily looking at the positions they play. Now, having said that, Barney, the linebacker DB angle is an interesting one because those two position groups are excellent on the teams. So you can really bolster your special teams, which, as you know, is so important in Canadian football, more so big time than down south. You can really bolster those teams with linebackers and DBs covering kicks, returning kicks, missed field goals and chasing people down and making blocks there for the big returns. So, I think, if your philosophy is get guys in your training camp, then you're not taking the chance early or at least in the first few rounds on a Curtis Rourke or guys like that. And you're probably looking to build your special teams, and potentially those guys become starters sooner rather than later. But that's there's a lot of different philosophies. It's very different and unique than any other draft in any other sport.
Edmonton, round 2, going with Canadian defensive linebacker Damian Newells from Queens. So another defensive linebacker and a Canadian on the board as well. The also today, Glenn, in the global draft, that went today. 2 rounds of exhilarating action in the global draft. Now, you were over there watching football, and we got firsthand looks, and you got to talk to some people over there and all that. I joked, and I said, hey, it's the Australian punter draft today. And sure enough, the Riders got Jesse Murko, a punter out of Australia, in the second round, but they got Sylvain Yawajuan, that's how I'm scoring with it, defensive lineman from Belgium in round 1. Yeah. He played for Georgia Tech. What changes would you make to this?
Well, I like the idea of the draft, and I like the idea of, looking around the world for quality players, and to engage other, fan bases. And, if one of those guys became a star receiver from Belgium or from Italy, I think you're going to grow a fan base that's going to buy merchandise and watch the games and things like that from Italy. They're going to watch their guy. So there's, that's the upside of that. I thought, and I still believe, that early on in this, and it's been a few years now, that the pendulum went too far when we decided to make a mandatory roster spot one of these guys, because, there were a lot of different players, kickers, as you mentioned, that were losing their jobs because you had to put, a global player on the roster. And that global player, as you mentioned again, was usually a kicker. So, one thing I've noticed, though, about the global draft, and when I watched them live, I bet you I could have plucked out 15 players on those two teams that I was watching, one from Rome, one from Florence, that could make it at the pro level. And that's just one game. It's a small sample size. But I just thought there's some guys out here that can play. And, so I think there's talent around the world and talent in Europe and stuff that they can look at. It becomes a matter of, is it a mandatory spot at this point, or is there a developmental aspect? The one thing I've noticed about the global draft, and you'll notice when you look at the names, guys like that originally are from Belgium or Italy or wherever are actually going to school in the States.
Yeah.
So you're seeing their college resumes say, Utah, Florida State, things like that. So they're getting really good football training, which means that, 5 years from now, we may be looking at some real star receivers, linebackers, D linemen, things like that are coming from the global draft.
Yeah. Maybe a few tweaks is right. Okay, well, we're going to watch this thing as it unfolds, and then when we catch up on Thursday, we'll know how all the chips fall and if there's any surprises. Have a good evening watching the draft, helping out Glenn, and we'll catch up on Thursday.
Okay, thanks, Barney.